Mic check, mic check. What's going on here? Okay, looks like we might be online. I'll just post some notifications to the various social medias in case people want to come join in live. Okay, I think we're good. Right. So the first thing I want to do today, I'm going to be doing some smallish features, kind of chores, but it will be new things for people to play around with. So the first thing we're going to do is a Kafka thing. So I've had a lot of people recently asking for the ability to have a Kafka consumer that always starts from the oldest or latest message. So as if there was no oh, somebody in the chat. Hold on. I'm going to respond audibly, and also I'm going to respond textually. I wonder what the delay is, because it's kind of hard for me to see how big the delay is. So anyway, so we've got Kafka consumer. Now that the hellos have been established, I can now carry on. So we want to be able to consume from Kafka and basically not use consumer groups. So we don't care about any previously stored offsets. We just want to start from scratch. I think for now, so I think most people seem to either want to consume straight from the earliest offset or the latest. But also, I think Marco asked me for the ability to actually specify an offset. I think I might do that at some point, but I think that the reason why that's going to get a bit complicated is because within a config, you can specify any number of topics and partitions. So I think trying to make it a configurable thing to be able to specify a specific offset, it's going to have to be local to the topic partition. So I think I can still do that. What I might do, because I've been thinking about this loosely, so right now if you want to have topics that you consume from, it might actually be easier to show this on the documentation site. Hang on. So let me show my actual screen. So we've got the documentation site up here. What you normally do is you've got an array of topics that you can specify, and you can either just specify a topic and it will interpret that as partition balancing. So you're joining a consumer group and automatically distributing the partitions of a topic. Or what you can do is specify an explicit partition number. And obviously you can specify the same topic multiple times with different partitions each. And what I might do is if eventually we want to support the ability to have an explicit offset that you start from, I might just expand this so you can have an extra colon and then the given offset for that partition. I think that's probably the cleanest way of supporting that. But then it gets a little bit messy, because if you've got a consumer group specified and you do have a stored offset, should the behavior be to go with that offset or the one that you've specified? So I'm sure there's a nice user-friendly default there, but I haven't given it enough thought. I think there's quite a lot to think about with that, so I'm just going to leave it for now. So what I'm going to do for now is, right now you always have a consumer group, and it's actually got a default value, so even if you don't specify it in your config, then it will have a default. So you're basically always in a consumer group when you run the Kafka input. So what I'm going to do is allow you to not have a consumer group. For now, for the purpose of backwards compatibility, we're always going to have a default, because obviously if I remove that, it could break people's existing configs. But then eventually, when we have Benthos version 4, I'm going to have to make a call as to whether or not having a consumer group should be the default, because it seems a little bit safer that way. I suppose it's not. You're not going to lose data if you don't specify it, as long as the default for start from oldest is true, which I think it probably is. Let's have a look. Start from oldest is set to true by default, so yeah, we could have a world in the future where you have a consumer group that's not set by default, and then if you accidentally don't specify one, worst case scenario is you just get a flood of duplicates. But anyway, not something I have to solve today, because we have to have a default consumer group today regardless. So the Kafka consumer, the Kafka input, is actually already branched into two separate consumers. The first one is consumer groups, and you get that if you don't specify explicit partitions with your topics. So if you just specify a topic without a partition list associated with it, then yeah, good for you. You're going to get a consumer group. Partitions are going to be automatically balanced. The other one is, I've just called it Kafka part, but essentially this is a Kafka consumer that has explicit partitions to consume from. I think I can probably just use this. Obviously, if we're not joining a consumer group, then there's no reason why you can't. Yeah, if you're not joining a consumer group, then you can just ask your broker for all the partitions that are available, and you can start consuming them. I think to begin with, I'm just going to say that if you don't have a consumer group and you don't specify explicit partitions, we will grab the partitions that are currently there when the input kicks off, but we're not going to bother regularly scanning for new partitions. Does that seem reasonable? That seems a bit lazy to me. This is one of those issues where it's like, it's the actual implementation isn't that complicated. It's more just thinking about, what are you giving users foot guns where they can accidentally, make assumptions based on what the config looks like that aren't necessarily true because I just haven't implemented stuff that way yet. Or okay, I think what I'm going to do is, rather than, so hang on, I think I need to give a visual representation, so I'm going to create a Kafka input. Oh, I can't type today. Right, so if I create file example.yaml, so I've got a Kafka input. I'm going to delete most of this junk. Wow, there really wasn't much point in me generating that. I could have written this by hand, I think. Right, so you can specify any number of topics. Let's imagine a world where we've got food topic and also bar topic. And what I want to do is I don't want to use a stored offset. I want to start from oldest, so I want the earliest offset for these topics. What I'm going to force users to do is explicitly set the consumer root to empty, otherwise... Oh, happy Saturday. Sorry, I almost missed that. So yeah, you're going to have to explicitly set an empty consumer group, and that indicates to Benthos, hey, we don't care about any stored offsets for these topic partitions, we just want to consume from wherever we've said. And because we've got start from oldest is true, that means the behavior is when we don't have a stored offset, we're going to get the earliest possible one. This config describes we want to get all the partitions of both of these topics and we want to consume them all from the earliest offset. If there's 5 partitions each when we kick this input off, I don't necessarily think it's unreasonable for a user to assume that this input would automatically go and find those new partitions and start consuming them. But I also don't want to implement that because that's going to be more work, and I would rather just get this out. I think, to be honest, 99% of the people who've asked for this would be satisfied with having to make explicit partitions. So when you're specifying explicit partitions, you have to specify the same topic multiple times. You can either do that with a comma separated list, or you can just add more elements. That's how you'd specify explicitly consuming the partitions of a topic. Now this config doesn't fall into the same trap because we're forcing users to be explicit, and therefore when you read this config you couldn't make that assumption that it's going to go and automatically pull new partitions that currently don't exist. This is also kind of naff. So what I did when I initially implemented this syntax, I only implemented as much as I thought that I was going to need. So what I didn't do was allow you to specify ranges of partitions. It's not hugely difficult. So let's say we want to consume partitions 1 to 5. It wouldn't be particularly difficult to support that syntax. I just didn't at the time because, again, it's just more work in it. But I think if we're going to be in this world where we're going to force, if you want to consume without a consumer group, so you don't care about the stored offsets, this is getting complicated, then you're going to have to explicitly list the partitions that you're consuming from. Maybe it's worth me implementing this range syntax just to make that a little bit nicer. Well, I can do that later. Yep, I'll tell you what, I can do that later. I'm going to go with explicit partitions for now. And then I can release this and put it in people's hands, and then if they want better syntax, then we can deal with that later, because otherwise I'm just not going to write any code for a month while I go in loops. So, okay, so as I said, there's 2 different consumers and the point where we branch off. So what we do is when we initialize the Kafka reader, we iterate through all the topics that have been listed, and then what I do is I split them out by comma. So if you've done this syntax here, we split those out, and then what I do is I trim them, which is a good idea. And then we split by colon, and then if we have parts, that's interesting. Okay, yeah, so if we've got the colon syntax in there, then that means we're explicitly consuming from partitions, and therefore what I do is, I'll explain this in a second, but what we do is we extract the topic, we parse the integer, and then spit out an error if it's incorrect. And then, so I've got two different maps of topics. The first one is a map of topic name to partitions, and the other one is just a list of topics that you consume from. And you can't mix these right now, so it would be invalid for you to do something like this. And the reason for that, again, is just laziness, and I think that most people would want one or the other. They either want to balance partitions automatically, or they want to consume from explicit partitions. So I figured it's easier for me to deal with a world where we're doing one or the other, so I'm just going to enforce that for now. But again, I could expand this later. But what I've done is I've essentially made it so that when we're parsing out these topics, if it turns out you've already populated some balanced topics and you now have specified an explicit one, then we return an error, and the same the other way around. And we've just got this generic error cannot mix. You can't do that. So if I wanted to have a world where you could specify a range, it would be very easy. I could probably just implement that right now, but no, I'm going to resist the temptation. It's not just the implementation, by the way. I could probably implement it in seconds, but then I've got to write tests for it. Resist the urge to implement that. I'm just going to do the bit that I want to do and nothing else. So, okay, so we've got this world where we're parsing out the so we've got topic partitions or balanced topics, and what I'm going to do is, I don't think we've actually got a check here for whether the consumer group's been specified. The error, I mean, there is going to be an error if you do that, I think, because we're going to try and get stored offsets and the consumer group isn't going to exist. So we will catch that at some point, but what I'm going to do is I'm just going to catch it further down here, or I'm going to say if the length of your consumer group is empty and you've specified balanced topics, errors.new, a consumer group must be specified when consuming topics, when consuming balanced topics. Does that work? So somebody comes along, they specify no consumer group, and then they say, I want to consume from topics foo and bar, just like what the documentation says. And then they get told, nope. A consumer group must be specified when consuming balanced topics. Are they going to understand that a topic without an explicit partition is a balanced topic? I think that's probably fine for now. Yeah, I think that's fine for now. We can revisit that at a later stage. So the next thing that happens, we've initialized our reader. And the next thing that happens is we connect. Yep, so in my reader interface, we've got a connect method, which basically instructs the reader to establish the connection to upstream and start consuming at your leisure. What we do is we're using Cerama for this. So we create a new Cerama config and we translate some of the fields in the Benthos config. This is a mess as well. I might make an issue in the future because I've got a bunch of issues for tracking what needs to happen before version 4 of Benthos. So all the breaking changes are going to get lumped together. one thing I might do is revise the configuration spec for Kafka, because what Sorama does is Sorama abstracts Kafka's configuration, and I suppose it's trying to make it more sensible or whatever, but it ends up becoming a bit confusing sometimes because it doesn't have a one-to-one mapping with Kafka fields. So you can't use Kafka's own documentation for understanding how to make a consumer for Sorama necessarily. You have to look at Sorama's docs and then indirectly associate that with the official Kafka docs. And then what I've done is I've added another abstraction on top of that, where I've got my own configuration spec, which I've tried to document as best I can, but then ultimately there's going to be people from an actual Kafka background who understand Kafka probably even better than I do, who will come and look at my docs and go, what? How does this relate to Kafka fields? So what I might do in the future is I might simplify it a bit and try and follow Kafka's own config spec. Sorama is a beast. I remember when I first found Sorama, like obviously very early on in building Benthos, and I'd used it a little bit in the past, and I just couldn't believe how it was a completely native Go implementation, because Kafka's massive. And then I was looking at it, and I actually saw a talk from the maintainer, and he was going over the architecture, and it was amazing. It was a massive thing. Definitely not a lightweight library. Very appreciative though. It does have there are some quirks in there, definitely, but then I can forgive that because it does do a lot of stuff. So yeah, I might redo the config spec at some point and try and make Benthos match the actual Kafka config a little bit closer. Right, so we've got two. So this is where the fork happens, right? So we connect. What happens is, based on whether or not you've specified explicit topic partitions, we have a separate function to call which connects to the explicit topics, or we connect to balanced topics. So what I can do in here, this is the path that we're going to take currently, because this is the only path that you can go in where you don't have a consumer group. So here's the first place where we right, here's the first place where we reference the consumer group. So what are we going to do here? Well, this is obviously going to have to be optional now. Oh. Okay, I already did that. So now we're going to have to put a check. If len can you conf consumer group greater than 0. Then we'll create a coordinator. And the coordinator gets referenced a couple places. Let's just do the... Let's put the nil checks in the obvious places first. So it looks like we've got two places where it gets used. The first is when we fetch the initial offsets, and that's pretty easy to gloss over. And then what we do is we've got a loop where we commit new offsets. We do that once here. Ah, okay, this is on a loop. Huh. Wait, what? Where's the sleep in this? Oh, okay, commit period. Oh, okay, so it's a manual commit loop. Ooh, that's interesting. Okay. Yep, this is pretty easy to get rid of. So I do a bit of wonky logic here where we've got an offset response. And we might want to use the 0 value anyway when we get an end of file response. So, simple as this. I'm just going to read through the logic here just to both make sure I've understood it and try and explain what I'm doing. So when we first start up, we want to fetch the stored offsets, if there are any, for the explicit partitions that we've added to our offset request. There's no point in me initializing this either when we... oh, actually... yeah, there is. I need to find where I grab the oldest or newest if these offsets don't exist. Oh, what was I saying? Okay, so if the coordinator is not null, then we want to grab those offsets. So what we do is we call fetch offset, which takes a pointer to the offset request. Oh, hang on. Oh, okay. No, I misread this. I need to keep the logic that I had before. Yeah, because this is going to get overridden. It's not just a pointer that will return to thing. It's going to get overridden. So, okay, yeah. Right, if coordinator does not equal nil, else. Oh, this is getting to be quite a big block. Oh well. Okay, so empty offset fetch response, and that is important because so we'll get an empty offset response, and then this is used. I'm just going to ignore the bit where we're actually storing the offsets. Looking at my comments. Right, so we... for every topic and every partition of that topic, this is where we actually get the offset, if there is one. So if I've just left this as an empty object because our coordinator doesn't exist, then this will just, it will just work. Trademark. Yeah, and we won't have an error. Well, we'll get a... this offset isn't stored error. And then we actually kick off the partition consumer. Oh, and this is interesting. Yeah, so I've got pretty bad logic here. So when I kick off the actual consume, if that fails for any reason, then we try it again with either the oldest or newest offset. Now, overwhelmingly, when a consume fails, it's because the stored partition doesn't exist anymore. However, even though that is the case, this would also mean that if it's a race condition between grabbing partitions from the coordinator and consuming, where we've got some intermittent connectivity problems or something, then this isn't great, because if the connection happens to recover by the second consume call, then we'll end up with duplicates, or if somebody's disabled start from oldest, then we'll get some data loss as well, and it's kind of preventable. I'm going to put a to do here because I can come back later, but basically actually verify the error was caused by a non-existent offset for the... No, I'm just going to leave it there. Yep. And then if we fail again, then yeah, we just say, oh, this is definitely a real problem. I mean, this is probably fine because the chance of this first request failing and the second one succeeding, if this is a proper connectivity issue, then it's probably not high. Like, I feel like this is one of those things where it's behavior that's not necessarily terrible because it will at least kind of recover. It's just not ideal. But yeah, whatever. So once we've established it, then we kick off this whole thing where I keep track of a bunch of different arbitrary partition consumers. So up until now, I think we're pretty much okay. The thing that's still got to be dealt with is storing offsets as they get updated. Now we kick off the offset commit here. So I can just wrap this in a... Actually, is there any point in this loop at all? Yes. So this loop here gets kicked off at the same time as all the partition consumers, and essentially it's responsible for kicking off the commits periodically. And also once we're closing down, then we exit this loop and we also close all the consumers, and then we wait for the consumers to close, and then we signal that we're done. And then we clear up all our other resources. So this I'm going to leave as it is. We're not going to be committing offsets anymore. So I'm just going to, if coordinator does not equal nil, then we actually commit the offset. And I think we're fine. So this is obviously a little bit bleh because we're locking mutexes, which is also going to lock up the partition consumers. However, it's not going to happen often, so I'd be very surprised if that had a significant impact on performance. Basically what it means is every commit period we're going to arbitrarily lock some mutexes and copy some data, and there's not really going to be much point to it. In fact, there's definitely not going to be any point to it. If I was really looking to optimize this, then I could pull this out into a channel that gets initialized earlier, and I would put this around a if block. So if the coordinator is not null, then establish it. Otherwise, just leave it as an uninitialized channel, which will block forever, and then we only break out of it once the context is closed. But yeah, I'm not too fussed about that right now. Where does this offset tracker get used then? So okay, right, yeah, there's a bit of bouncing stuff around here. So once we're done initializing all the partition consumers, we also set a session, which is this offset tracker. And that's responsible for, so this is actually an interface type, which I can show ye, where we mark the offsets from each individual consumer. And that's common across the partition balance as well as the explicit partition consumers here. So what ends up happening is once we've kicked off each partition consumer, at some point, yeah, here we go. So we create a batching policy. We have a checkpointer, which is what limits the number of messages we can process in parallel. And then where's our checkpointer? Oh, okay, so it's the check pointer itself that, right. Yeah, okay, so this is an interesting little bit of logic here. So the check pointer is responsible for it essentially consumes it's provided messages from what's consuming from a partition, and it's responsible for blocking when we still have messages in flight from that same partition that haven't been finished yet. So by default, you can only process one message batch from a partition at a time, because if you increase that, then you lose your in-order processing, which is a major feature of Kafka. So the default here is to preserve that at the cost of, it means it's more difficult to do parallel processing and utilize CPU cores, but then at the same time, that's why you do things like partition balancing. So it's not a massive issue. But the check pointer is responsible for, if a user specifies the field is checkpoint limit, if you increase that, then the amount that you've set it to becomes the maximum number of message batches. The maximum number of messages of a partition that you can process in parallel. And it's basically lose the ordered processing part of it, and it makes pipelines a little bit more efficient. Now, the way that works is it pushes n messages, however many you've set as your limit, down the pipeline and allows them to all be acknowledged asynchronously. And then its job is to never mark an offset to be committed until all earlier offsets have also been acknowledged. So you imagine you push offsets 5 to 10 to be sent somewhere else, and 5 to 10, 7 gets acknowledged, 8 gets acknowledged, and then 6 gets acknowledged. None of those offsets will have been committed yet. And then when 5 becomes acknowledged, then 5, 6, 7, and 8 get marked. And it's a doozy to get that to work and not be unlimited memory usage, but I think I solved it. It's an optional feature. It's opt-in, so I'm not sure how many people are actually using that in production, but it's been released for a while. I definitely know that at least one person is using it in production, so I think, given their volume, we would have seen issues with it at this point. Anyway, I've completely gone off track. The only purpose in coming up here is to see where mark offset gets done. So this is a call. We lock that mutex. This is the same shared mutex that I showed you earlier. And what it essentially does is it means that the session can't be changed while this happens. And what we end up doing is we mark the offset and then we unlock the mutex. So this is still going to happen even when we don't have any offsets to mark, because we don't care about them. I could optimize this out, but nah, not worth changing it for now. So what does that mean? What does that actually mean? Back in my Kafka parts consumer. So what that means is offset put request and offset tracker, these get initialized and we still interact with them. But I don't care. But I don't care that I don't care. So it's fine. Is that it? I think that might be it. Yeah, I think that might be it. I think I might have implemented this feature. Right, next thing to do is test this heavily. We do have integration tests for Kafka. I can do some other stuff as well. So we've got integration tests that rely on the Wurstmeister. I'm not good with German. Docker image for Kafka, and this is a bit of a beast to run, so I hated it. It's just awkward. It works on my Linux machine, but I'm pretty sure these integration tests barf on Macs because of the networking stuff that it does. So what I did not that long ago was I added some new integration tests that use Red Panda, which is a product being made by a company called Vectorized, and it's essentially their remake of Kafka in C++, and the goal is for it to be quite a bit faster, and also not rely on Zookeeper. Now I know that that's also Kafka's goal, and I think they've finished that now, but I'm not willing to wait. I will update. I'm always going to have an official Kafka integration test, but this one's just quicker to run, and I like testing that we can integrate with Red Panda as well. Right, so I'm going to modify these. So we've got a test suite. If you haven't ever seen the integration tests, this is pretty cool. What we do is we start off by using Docker test, which is a great library. We use that to run the service that we're integrating with, and then we wait for the resource to come online. And then what I do is I write a configuration template. So this is an actual Benthos configuration, and what it's got is some placeholder variables. The most important one being ID. And then what I do is I've got this set of libraries for specifying integration tests that are kind of common for different queue systems. So the problem that I had is I've got a bunch of different queue systems that I want to test, and they've all got different capabilities and guarantees. So the integration test that you want to run for each one is going to be slightly tailored to the queue system. So for example, with Kafka, then I want to make sure that with lossy connections, we still have at least once delivery guarantees and things. And yeah, the way that this integration test suite works is you specify a config, and that's how you interact with the specific service. So you're testing the same thing that users are going to be running when they actually run Benthos, and then you've got your integration test suite, which is a bunch of different common test types. And then what you do is you actually run it, and the way that you run it is you have a few opt functions when you call run. So you give it the template, and then you can do some other things. So with Kafka, for example, I have a little pre-test func that I run where I actually create the Kafka topic. I've got a little helper function here, and you can create a topic with explicit number of partitions, which is kind of useful for these tests. And then there's another opt for specifying port to connect to, and that gets replaced in here. And then you can do a few other things. So you can specify arbitrary variables. So here we've got a variable 2, which gets replaced here. So I can run my suite with a checkpoint limit of 1, and then I can run the same suite with different variables. I felt like this was nice and intuitive, but I don't force many people to write integration tests for Benthos, so I haven't really tested that hypothesis. But yeah, what I'm going to do is I'm going to... So I do specify the consumer group in my config, but I don't allow you to have an empty consumer group. Oh, I didn't explain the ID. So the ID, this is the most important part of the test. An ID gets generated for every single separate integration test that runs. And when you interpolate that into your config, that is supposed to provide total isolation between the different tests, so they don't step on each other's toes. So in Kafka world, I create a completely separate consumer group and run off a different topic. Whereas for S3, for example, the ID would determine the bucket's name. So you're always interacting with a different bucket for each test. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy the explicit partitions. So I need to do two things. I need to copy the explicit partitions tests, and I also need to make it so that my tests can override the consumer group. I think what I'm going to do is, rather than prefixing it with ID, how am I going to do this? How am I going to do this? I need to override the ID specifically for the consumer group field. Okay, I can do this. Oh, this is cool. Streaming is awesome. Nice job on those test helpers. They have a bit of a learning curve, but they're great after that. Cool. Okay, thank you. Well, it's good to know. Yeah, I always felt guilty before because the way the integration tests were put together was awful. Loads of boilerplate, and I kind of felt bad if somebody was writing a new connector. I felt really bad asking them to do integration tests for it because I was basically just leaving them on their own. So when I redid it, I was trying to make it as easy to just copy paste the previous test as possible, but it's still, there's still a lot of stuff going on that you've kind of got to understand. But I don't feel as guilty making people write them now. And also it's quicker for me to then go and update them if they need it. Right, I'm going to copy. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a little bit of a hack. Please don't be mad. So I'm going to edit the test environment on every... Do I run pre-test on everything? Yeah, I do. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to set config vars. I'm going to use var 3. var 3? Oh no, I'm already using var 3. No. But I think I stopped using var 1. Otherwise I was going to have to add a whole new var. Can't have a var 4. What I'm going to do is I'm going to copy the... yeah, I'm going to make the consumer group an explicit variable. var 1. And I'll be very careful, since I'm going to set this as empty for some of these tests, and it's YAML. I'm going to put it in quotes so that we don't end up with broken YAML. And in the test opt pretest for these, config vars var 1. What? Oh. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to make it the ID. Because I don't think we need the... whatever. Let's call it group. Group plus and then the ID. And I'm going to copy this in all the tests that expect to have a consumer group, which is all of them so far. And I'm just going to make sure that this runs. So, right, go test tags integration. Ooh. So this is how you run the integration test. You have to have there's a build flag. So there's no build tag for the actual test definition. So they always get compiled. But then what ends up happening is we have this one file that does have the build tag, which is the thing that actually runs the tests. So that's how you have the test disabled for standard unit test invocations, but the tests will always get compiled in. So we add our tags integration, and this time I want to run test integration / and I've called this Kafka Red Panda. So this is just testing that I haven't broken anything. And it does take a while because it is an integration test. That's nobody's fault. It's just the way it is. Oh, I did get some advice as well, which I'm going to utilize now. So Alexander, the maintainer of Red Panda, gave me some flags to use for right, yeah, Alexander gave me this flag over provisioned, which I'm going to put here to run, and he said it would help with performance. I don't know why I set that to 2. That should probably just be 1. Oh no, my tests aren't running. Well, they're not finishing. I have I have a beast of a PC. I have an absolute stonking PC. I think I've broken my tests. So this is one thing that kind of is rubbish about my tests, and that is that when they fail, almost all of them are designed in such a way that they last until the test time's out, because they're waiting for a message that they're expecting. So if there's a problem, then quite often the tests will run for a full however long by default. It could be 5 minutes, could be, I can't remember what the default timer is actually. I think it is 5 minutes. I'm not going to make people wait for 5 minutes. I will kill the container at spawn though. But we should probably just check to see where the error is actually happening. Let's have a glance. So we're now using var1 as our consumer group. Oh no, I am using var1. Oh! Viewers, why didn't you warn me? Oh! Viewers. Viewership. That's what you're for. You're supposed to help me with this stuff. You did. I'm not going to invite you next time. Oh, that means I've got to change all these files. I might as well have just done this solo. Okay, right. Now there is a process for introducing new variables. What have I got all these ports for? Ugh. There is an official process that must be followed. This is pretty this is pretty ghetto, I have to say. I'm not particularly proud of this, but if it works, then we'll change it. It's just tests, isn't it? It's just tests. Whoa! Oh, that's a proper one. That's a proper error. What's going on here? Send messages. The producer. Send on a closed channel. Is that deterministic? Okay, good. It's deterministic. Okay, yeah, that's good. That probably means I need to enable the logging. Whoa! That's a big one. Right, so I'm going to run a... Oh, hang on, it's because I've specified a 5-second timeout. Okay, right. Filter crate, input Kafka, and consumer group must be specified when consuming balanced topics. Okay, for some reason my variable isn't being interpolated still. Why is that? Consumer group. var4. 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 4. Let's just run one of these. Balanced. That is interesting. Is that an actual error in my... Yeah, that means the consumer group is empty. What is happening here? Oh, okay. That's annoying. Yeah, it's because I don't have this pre-test opt-func. I feel like this is not the way to go, but I don't want to spend too much time just getting my tests to work. I feel like changing the consumer group should be something that I only bother with in my empty consumer group tests, and having to manually set a dynamic test environment change for all of these tests seems a little bit off. Let me think about this for a second. How long have I been going? Oh, I've been going for ages. I was going to get like 8 things done today and I'm still on the first one. And I'm doing it in the laziest way possible. Yeah, okay, right. I'm going to go ahead with this now. So we've got 2 variants of the explicit partitions test. We do it once with 1 as our checkpoint, and then we do it again with 1,000. So this is setting that field I described earlier, where we've got the checkpoint limit. So it allows you to have out of order parallel processing of a partition's messages. I think for this, because it's all the same code path, I'm only going to have 1 suite. But we will do multiple, yeah, I'm going to do multiple partition topic partitions. And yeah, we get rid of the copy and get rid. So let's just do a recap of what the test suite actually is for this. So we have, can we open up the connections and close them gracefully? Yep, we'd like to check that. Can we send metadata through this particular service and get it on the other end? Yep, we want to test that. Can we send a batch of data with an explicit size? Yep, makes sense to test that. Can we send a bunch of messages to the service, then kick off the consumer and have it consume all the messages? So yeah, I think we definitely want to check that. We've set start from oldest is implicitly true. I might make that explicit here, because that might be something that we want to shake up with more tests later, not now. Can't be bothered to do it now. And then we do it again, another one, so test stream parallel. So this yeah, this is fine. Yeah, I'll tell you what, this is something that we'll run. So what this test is going to do is it's going to run off the producer and consumer at the same time. So we're going to be writing data to Kafka at the same time as we're trying to consume it. Because we've set start from oldest to true, I would still expect us to see all the data in that in each topic partition. So that's fine. And then, so this is an interesting one. So this is a test that does the same thing. It's writing data to Kafka at the same time as it's reading data from Kafka. And what happens is the consumer gets killed somewhere in the process whilst data is still being written to Kafka. And then it gets started again, and we just make sure that we still see every message. This test isn't bothered if we see duplicates of all the data. So if we read, 50% of the messages that got written to Kafka, and then we get killed, and then we get started back up again, if we then see the entire 100% of the data in that second run, we still consider this to be a successful test. We're not fussy about percentage of duplicates when we kick off again. So I'm happy with that. We can definitely run that for this, and it should succeed. And then the final one is just sending a batch via batch count at the input level. Or is that the output level? Don't know. Let's run it and see what happens. Explicit partitions. Yep. And we need to rename. So we've got I'm going to put without consumer group. And run that. Let's see. Cool. Okay. Integration test pass. Do I want to go any further? There is more stuff I can test here. It doesn't explode. We get the messages. I'm 90%, I'm 80% sure that we are configuring this correctly within the scope of the test. Yeah, I think I'm happy with that for now. I'm going to let people play with it. Again, I don't suspect anybody's going to actually be using this. It's probably worth clarifying this, especially in the documentation when I write it, that I don't expect anybody to be doing this in production. I think this is more for utility purposes. So say somewhere downstream in your pipeline, a service went down and you suspect that some messages have been lost. It's convenient to be able to just kick off a backfill of some topic partitions. So it's something that I would expect people to run as a kind of occasional tool, like utility purpose, rather than something that they're going to be running continuously in production. Whoa, I implemented that fast. Identify for the consumer of the connection. This field can be explicitly made empty in order to disable stored offsets for the consumed topic partitions. Which can be useful in situations such as which can be useful for performing backfills and no. I don't know. It's up to you to decide what this is useful for. Identify for the consumer group of the connection. This field can be explicitly made empty in order to disable stored offsets for the consumed topic partitions. Okay, I think that's fine for now. I'm wondering, I kind of feel like I'm messing this up a bit because I think in its current state, I do have a strong suspicion that the people asking for this are not going to be happy with needing to explicitly list every single partition that they've got. I'm wondering if I should do the range bit now and just get it out of the way. Yeah, I'll tell you what, let's do this now. This topic, I'm going to document this first. Actually, I'll tell you what, I'm going to add a changelog entry. Because I do this by hand. Release new, the Kafka input now allows an empty consumer group for operating without stored offsets. Right, so what we want to do is we want to allow somebody to do this. All right, that's not equivalent to the example I just gave. Let's do that. Yeah, this is what I want to support. A list of topics to consume on multiple comma-separated topics can be listed in a single element. Partitions are all... I should do an audio book of Benthos documentation. Partitions are automatically distributed across consumers of a topic. Alternatively, it's possible to specify an explicit partition to consume from. Specify explicit partitions to consume from with a colon after the topic name, e.g. foo:0 would consume the partition 0 of the topic foo. This syntax supports ranges. I'm sure I document somewhere that you have to Am I missing something? I'm sure in my documentation I explain the comma stuff. Or do I just do it in a comment? Yeah, there you go. Yeah, okay. Right. I explained an error. This syntax supports ranges, e.g. foo 0 to 10 would consume partitions 0 through to 10 inclusive. Now, that's a long description of a field, but I think it's fine. Yeah, I think this is fine. And what's also going to happen is my logic down here for pulling topic partitions out is going to be bloated as all heck. Not a huge fan of how big this is getting. I want to keep the fork here, but I can break all of this out into a separate function, which yeah. Okay, so we get the topic out and then we verify that the syntax of the partition. So we verified that everything after the colon is valid. We still want this check in this block. So I'm going to pull out specifically the bit where we're extracting the number from the partitions into a function. Parse topic partitions. Just say parse partitions. Expr, because it's an expression now, and we're going to give back a slice of numbers, or possibly an error if the syntax is bad. And I'm just going to pull this out now. Start off with a slice. Now I'm in the old world. It would have just been this. There you go. In the old world we would have this, where the expression is just a number. Parts equals parse partitions, and the expression now is with parts and the bit that comes after the colon. If is not nil, we return the and then we append our partitions. Okay. Yep. There's a typo on line 78. Are you kidding me? If an offset is not found for... Oh, well spotted. Okay, you'll be invited to the next one. Well done. That is not in more places. Are you kidding me? No, I'm going to catch it before you can shame me with a PR. Actually, no, go ahead. I'm distracting myself. So, right, parse partitions. So what we want to do now is we want to be able to parse out multiple partitions. Now, the only circumstance that I am willing to accept a human person being specifying more than one partition in one topic partition expression is with a range. I don't want any of this adding in commas or slashes or anything like that. If you want partitions 1, 3, and 5, you're going to have to specify in separate topic partition entries for now. I can expand the syntax later, but I'm sick of this. I'm sick of it. People feeling like they're entitled to express everything conceivable. Right, strings split by a dash. It's interesting. How am I gonna organize this? If the range expression is greater than 2 elements, then you're having a laugh. Only one range yeah, okay, so if somebody's put multiple dashes, then chances are chances are, oh, go away. Chances are they're trying to do something like this. Why would they want to do that? What does that mean? So in an attempt to use... you know what? I'm not going to try and give people guidance there. I have no idea what they've done. If they get that. Partition blah is invalid. Only one range can be specified. And the same topic can be... I'm going to leave that out. I think if you end up with multiple dashes in your expression, then you need to get in touch. And we need to dig into what kind of syntax you're trying to get. And then maybe I can implement it. Right, so we've got a range expression that we've split. If it's more than 2, then you're wrong. If it's 1, then we do this, where we just parse the entire expression. I'll tell you what, just to make this bit, we're going to exit early here. There you go. Oh. Yeah, we're going to exit early with this. So if you haven't got a dash in there, then we just return the parse int. But if you did have a dash, then what we do is we parse. So we've got to parse out 2 numbers. We need the... What do we need? We need the start and end. I'll pull these out. And we already got an initialized. No, we don't, because it's in a block. I'm not really thinking, I'm not really brain good right now. I do this quite a lot, well, a handful of times throughout the code base, because in my opinion, it's a little bit, no, I'll tell you what, this is, I don't like this. I don't think this is right. So I do that sometimes just to try and keep, if there's going to be multiple things that I'm testing, and rather than constant if equals nil blocks, I sometimes just try and cut the corner and say, let's have a little block, but that's not healthy, is it? And if I break this out into two separate checks, then I can return specific errors. F failed to parse start of range. Range express 0. I think strconf, when you fail the partition, I think it actually prints what it saw anyway. But I'm not entirely sure. I'm quite lucky. Yeah, it seems to already print what the number actually is, so I don't need this bit. Failed to pass start of range. Whoops. And then here, failed to pass end of range. And now, assuming that we were successful, okay, right, so we start with the start index, yep, and then we end, it's inclusive, so we want to make sure that we do at least the loop of the last value. I think this works. Let me stare at this for a couple of minutes. Let me stare at this while I think. Yeah, it's fine. We'll test it. It will get tested because I'm going to put it in my... I'm going to make it so that my start from 0 integration test uses a range, and then we've covered everything in a very convenient way. And that's it. Yeah, I think that's it. Okay, back to the integration test. First, let's just make sure nothing's broken. And it's not. Right, this is the bit that I'm going to change. So, this is pretty gross. So, probably, since I'm showing the internet, I'm highlighting this particular bit of code. I should probably explain. So, var1 appears here in my config. The reason why it's there is because I want to test explicit versus unexplicit topic partitions. So sometimes I want var1 to be empty, but sometimes I wanted what I wanted was a range, really. I wanted to create 4 partitions and consume for every single one. Now, previously, the only syntax that I supported was this, where you've got foo.0, comma, blah, 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 and you have a separate entry for every single partition. But now that we support ranges, I can get rid of that. I also have to do it dynamically because I have to specify the topic name for every single entry. It means that I have to do it dynamic because the topic is dynamic, because it's generated with the ID appended to it. So yeah, this is pretty naff. Not good, but it only appears here and here. So we've got 2 tests with explicit partitions that do this. What I might do is, I still want to keep this somewhere in one of these tests at least, because I want to make sure that I haven't regressed anywhere. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to do the easy option, which is set var1 here rather than in the pretest. And I'll do the same with, let's choose this one. Okay, cool. So we're testing the new range syntax with 2 of my tests, but I'm just going to run with that consumer group first. Now this obviously doesn't include testing, like I don't have unit tests for error checking bad topics. I suppose I can do, because we don't actually do any integration up until the point where we verify this stuff, because parse partitions happens before we've interacted with anything. So I could just check that parsing out with a unit test. Sorry to bore you. I know this isn't particularly interesting to watch. Test Kafka bad params. Conf new. Oh. Okay, so should I do this table driven? Yeah, whatever. Mixing. Mixing consumer types. Topics being and what's the string I expect? Now when I do these tests, I tend to just leave the actual error empty, because the chance of me remembering what the error actually is slim. Right, so for each test in our test cases, I always do this just in case I want to run the test parallel one day. And now what do? I do new conf I hate this function signature, by the way. This whole thing is on the way out in Benthos v4. A simplified, so all you have is a general manager type. Okay, so first we want to assert that there is an error. Actually, we can just say equal error. What? I always get that wrong. Failed to grab blah blah blah. Okay, yeah. That is the error we expected. Okay, right. And the other thing we want to do is too many partitions. So we'll have a topic where we specify a partition and then another partition, another one like this. And what does the error come back as? That's a good error message. Look at that. Tells you what went wrong and it explains how to fix it. I think it's too long. I think I ought to change that. But not now. And what else do we want to check? We want to check bad range. So foo to 2 to 3. And this will give us a different class of error. Only one range be specified. What is this? Only one range can be specified. Oh, good job I wrote that test. Oh, don't tell me there's a data race in the socket input tests. I'll tell you what, can you just post the race in the Discord and I'll have a quick look at that. I literally probably introduced that yesterday. Data race. I wonder if I can kick it off now. That should teach you, don't fix typos. Don't fix those typos. Just look fine to me. Works on my machine. Okay, right, I'm done with this feature. Done with it, I'm happy with it. Let's update the documentation. Let's update those docs. And now that we've got lovely updated docs, let's just see what happened there. Yep, looks about right. Yeah, we've got an example. And add that particular feature to the change log. Now it allows an empty consumer group for operating source node and supports partition ranges. Should that be 2 separate lines? Yeah, let's make 2 separate lines. Just add an extra 25% features to the release with that. Good for us. Right. Yeah. Gonna add that. Did I lint it? I can't remember if I linted it. Yup. Okay, right. Snap. Okay, so yeah. The main thing here, this is technically 2 features in one. The main one being Kafka input supports partition ranges. You could argue it either way. Maybe the empty consumer group is the bigger feature, but it is what it is. It's official now. It's been pushed to GitHub. Okay, so I was gonna have a little bit of fun now with Kafka. Yeah, let's have a bit of fun. So, okay, as I said at the beginning, we've got 2 separate sets of integration tests now for Kafka. The first one using Red Panda, the second one using its actual Kafka in the Wurstmeister Docker image that they maintain. So it's running both Kafka, just a single broker. I did run make docs. I did. I promise. I did. Is it? I hope it's not broken in the CI. I promise I did. So we've got single broker for the official Kafka one. I don't like it because to be honest, actually I can probably still fix this the same way that I've done the Red Panda one. It's mostly just the fact that you've got to have Kafka and Zookeeper connect, so you've got to do all this nastiness with port bindings, and you've got to make sure it runs on all machines. It does work though. It definitely works on this machine. But it can be quite slow. So what I wanted to do was, I was just going to play around. So I haven't done any benchmarks with Red Panda. I think they're currently in the process of doing their own benchmarks as well, which would be interesting to see, because their goal is for Red Panda to be quite a lot better performance than a regular Kafka. And I mean, I'm sure with a rewrite, it's written in C++. To be honest, I'm sure rewriting it in any language, you can make some key optimizations. Because I think that's usually the case with anything. But, you know, fingers crossed. I mean, I'm not expecting Red Panda to just suddenly replace Kafka. Because, I mean, Kafka works and people know how to run it. And, you know, there are people who've built careers around it. And I don't think that's going to go away, but it's nice to have another player, another competitor in the ring for this kind of space. Because I mean, there's lots of cool queue systems coming out. I love Nats as well. Lots of cool queue systems coming about. And it's great to see more and more coming up and being successful, but I think Kafka is always going to be a thing. But yeah, what I was going to do was I was just going to run I was going to run the same test with both and just see what the difference is on my local machine. Yeah, it's an interesting thing about Jetstream. Jetstream, I'm hoping, is going to be awesome. I mean, it already looks pretty damn good. As soon as the client libraries are stable, in fact, to be honest, I'll probably add connectors before it's properly stable, but I'm giving it a little bit of time because I don't want to have to keep updating it. But yeah, Jetstream is definitely on my radar. I'm pretty excited for that as well. But Red Panda runs today, and you can replace. I think the amazing thing about Red Panda is literally you can just drop this in a pipeline that uses Kafka currently, and it just seems to work. Like obviously, it's quite early days, and I'm sure there's loads of things they need to fix and some features missing. But I mean, I wasn't expecting this to work, and in like 5 minutes I had it running with Benthos, and the integration tests again, I was expecting there to be a fair bit of resistance there, and this integration test suite I set up in, I don't know, it's probably like 15 minutes, and that's mostly dealing with my junk, not their junk. Yeah, I was just super impressed. But again, it's like, in terms of like measuring performance, it's such a massive scope, like to know how good something performs. Like there's so many different ways that you could look at that question, and different deployments that all have completely different requirements. So, I'm definitely not going to be running my own benchmarks and publishing them, but what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to run. So I've got a bunch of these integration tests, and they're pretty much the same for both services. Most of the time running these integration tests is just booting up the services themselves. I'm going to run this stream parallel test, and I'm going to do it with balanced consumers. So how do I run these particular tests? I do test integration, and then the pattern is Kafka, and then I think I've called it Kafka old and Kafka Red Panda. That's not a slight at Kafka. I'm not saying that Kafka itself is old. I'm just saying that these tests are old and need replacing, even though they're basically the same. And then what I want to do is, I can't remember what the actual name is for the parallel integration test. Can send and receive data in parallel. There you go. Can send, and I need to shorten these. Or do I? Maybe I need to make them bigger. Does that pattern work? No. No, because of CLI expansion. I always seem to mess up Go's run patterns. Warning, no test to run. Yep. Because I goofed. Oh, no. If it gives me no test to run again, I'm going to flip the table. Urgh! What's the pattern? What's the pattern? I'm sure it's regular expression. Kafka, and then either Kafka old or... What's going on with my keyboard? Kafka old or... What's going on here? How is that not what it is? Okay. Oh, okay. It's me. It's me. Yeah. It's me. Balanced. Okay, that should run this single test once for both types. Let's just make sure that's the case. Oh, it also runs the lossy one. Okay, we need to not do that. Let's not do that. Okay, right, so we're running, each test. So they take about 4 seconds each, mostly spent setting stuff up. And And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to crank the numbers up. So stream parallel, I don't know. Let's increase it by a factor of 10. Run it again, see what happens. I just want to know how many, like what order of magnitude should I be setting here to get a benchmark. I want a benchmark that's going to run for about a minute or so. So I know that we're properly saturating it with data. We're not just measuring how quickly I can spin up a Docker container. Again, this isn't a real benchmark. This isn't me actually getting real numbers that I would expect somebody to use when they're choosing a queue system. I'm just seeing roughly what's going on here. Okay, so we're running about 20 seconds now. If I increase this by another order of magnitude, then this is going to run for a bit, an English bit. And I'm going to run them side by side on the same machine first, and then I'll run them individually as well. Let's see what numbers we get. See what numbers we get. And then I think I'm done for this this session. I'm gonna go enjoy a bit of sunlight before it goes away. It's about 20 seconds before, so give or take 200 seconds. This will be a couple minutes. The suspense. Oh, cool, you figured it. Is it a doozy? Is it a certified doozy? A typo? No way! I don't do those. I'm not in the business of typos. Okay, this is taking longer than I thought it was going to take. Line 157 in socket.go. Oh, I didn't really change much in socket.go. Ah. Yeah, I did change that. I changed that. I changed like 3 lines of code in this file. I think it was yesterday. This is one of the lines I didn't change that I probably should have. Oh, we've got more of it as well. Oh, okay, this one's correct. Yeah, so we get our own local copy of codec. Oh, the benchmarks are done. Do you want to raise a PR for that and get the credit? Get your rank inflated on the contributors page. I think you're already number 2. Right, okay, well, look at this. 1:45 seconds for Red Panda. What's that? 186 for Kafka? 186? I'm not waiting an extra 40 seconds for my data. Let's run these individually. So let's do current Kafka first. I really feel like as well for contributors, I'd love to send stickers out. I've got a bag of stickers for events that I got back when events were in person, and I mean by the time people are back at actual real conferences again, I'm probably going to have a whole new batch of stickers. There's no point in me hanging on to them, but I wanted to send them out to people anyway. But I feel weird about asking people for their addresses. I don't know what, like, because I don't want to store other people's addresses and keep them somewhere. And also I don't know what I'm sure I can just send them in a letter. It's just going to be some modest. You might get a badge as well if I can send a badge in a letter and it not count as a parcel. Obviously, the borders here in the UK are a little bit slower than they used to be, a little bit more resistant to get things through. But yeah, I can probably send some stuff out, but I'll tell you what, anybody who's a contributor listening specifically to this stream, if you email your address with your GitHub username to hello@benthos.dev, then yeah, I'll get some stickers sent out. That might be a terrible mistake because I'm not sure if there's some legal stuff I need to be aware of if I'm going to start taking people's addresses. You got the idea. If I worked in border control, I was processing exports. If I even suspected that a letter had some Benthos stickers in it, I would shred that thing to bits to get to them. Any letter that I X-ray and has a Benthos-shaped outline on a stickerish piece of card, then yep, gonna whip that out. No chance of they getting past me. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know whether I'm probably overthinking it, but it's just a weird interaction of like saying to somebody, "Hey, saw your PR. That's cool. Give me your address. Tell me where you live." Okay, right. Kafka on its own, 197 seconds, and let's do it with Red Panda. I mean, this isn't life-changing performance impact for me, personally, but it is pretty cool because looking at the commit history for Red Panda, you know, they've been going at it pretty hard, but only for like a relatively short period. It's pretty cool. Check this out. So this is their commit history. They've got a few people working on it, mostly from kind of fourth quarter 2020. No. Okay, fourth quarter 2019. So I mean, about a year and a bit, year and a quarter. That's pretty cool. They've basically re-implemented the Kafka protocol. As big as it is. So yeah, it's an interesting thing, C++ instead of Rust. So I mean, I started off as a C++ developer, and years ago I was basically waiting for Rust to be stable. Every morning, waking up in a cold sweat. Rust, is it ready yet? And then, obviously, I ended up playing around with Go a lot, and that ended up becoming my job. Was primarily working in Go and replacing a lot of the C++ services we had. But to be honest, I'm still kind of on the mindset of like, if you know C++ well enough, then it's definitely worth playing with Rust, and it's awesome. Like I've loved it. I've loved playing with it professionally and privately. But I mean, I still think that good C++ is, it does have a place. It's got. I think if I was on my own building a new project from scratch, I'd go for Rust immediately, especially if it's going to be something open source, because Rust in the title of a Hacker News post is going to be inflated. But and it's fun, and it's it does have a lot of advantages. It's very modern in a lot of ways. I love Cargo, but if you've got a team of people and they're super competent with C++, and to be fair, rewriting Kafka in a year in C++, you're definitely competent in C++. There's definitely people who know what they're doing. I mean, obviously I haven't read the code or anything, but just the achievement on its own is pretty cool. So I think it's still, like, I would still make that call, unless you have a team of people who are super enthusiastic about trying out Rust and you've got the time and energy to experiment. But also, I mean, at the end of the day, you could, if you made the decision later on that you wanted to say shift the code base over to Rust plays quite nicely with C++, so you'd probably be fine with that, taking it gradual, if they wanted to. But I mean, I really wouldn't be surprised if they just carry on as is. If it works, it works. Right, well, look at this. Look at the numbers. The numbers speak for themselves. 197. I haven't done any configuration. You can see my configuration. Where is it? Here's my configuration. It's nothing. It's just running with whatever defaults Wurstmeister has decided for the default images. Pretty much the same with Red Panda. Basically, I haven't actually looked at what over provision does, but I'm assuming it does something performance-ish. I think I've cranked it down to basically use the minimum amount of parallel processing. I actually hit an issue with it where when I didn't specify SMP, which I think is related to how many parallel threads it runs, I hit an issue because I think I need to tell them about this actually, but I've got so many CPUs on my PC because I got one of the new AMD chips. I think it tried to spawn too many, I'm assuming it was green threads, and my machine didn't like it. But yeah, basically two services, minimal configuration, minimal setup, and that is quite a significant. I wouldn't bet a company on it, but that's quite a significant improvement already. Oh, cool. C++ meetups. Yeah, I'd play around with it. It's fun. It's fun. Like I wouldn't force it on anybody. Like I wouldn't force a team member to use Rust for something if they're not comfortable with it already and they're comfortable in something that we could use instead. Because I have to say, like, I think definitely it's a bit of a mouthful when I think you definitely bite off more than you can chew for a lot of people if you suddenly just dive in and want to work on it. But it's popular for a reason. Definitely. Right, I think I'm probably going to leave it there. We got two features. Look at that. We got 2 features. And you've got a fix coming. And yeah, there was like 4 more things I wanted to do today. Maybe I'll do them tomorrow. Maybe I'll pick the stream up again tomorrow. We'll see. We'll see how much energy I've got. I was going to do some more this week, during the week, but last week during the week, but I was too tired in the evenings. Right, so gonna leave it there. Gonna love you and leave you, and I'll list this stream so people can still access it offline at their leisure. And like and subscribe if you liked the video. You can express that by clicking the thumbs up button. I don't know if you're aware of this. There's a thumbs up button on the page on YouTube, and if you click that, it makes me more likely to do more videos. If you didn't like the stream, then sorry to hear about that, or not hear about it. Don't tell me about it. And if you want to see more videos, then there's also a button titled subscribe. And the thing about that is when I do more videos, you'll be informed, and you can be one of the first to get in. Maybe one more feature. Maybe I can do one more. I have a little list. I have a little to-do list. Let me have a look through the other things I was going to do. Let's have a look. There are some fun features coming up that I was maybe gonna do. Maybe gonna add a watcher to the file input. Update documentation. That's on the list. No, I'm done. I'm burning out. I'll see you all on the flip side. And yeah, again, next stream I'm going to post on the Discord and Slack channels. I'm just going to keep doing that. I don't want to pester people on Twitter or anything. I think the Discord and Slack channels are enough. Right, thanks everybody. Thanks for watching. Thanks for taking part. It's been a good one. I feel good. Hopefully you feel good too. I think we've all learned a lot today about software development, about open source, about Kafka, about documentation, about typos. We've learned a lot about typos today. But I think we've also learned a lot about ourselves. It definitely applies to me, and I think it applies to most of the people out there watching. I think we've all had a lot of personal growth today, and we should be thankful for that, but also proud of ourselves. Don't forget to thank yourself for that. Peace.